Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Another exciting show and definitely another exciting guest. Let me tell you where we're going today. Imagine going into surgery and having to stay for not one day, not two, not three, but months. Still dealing with the complications from that. Then having another surgery. And then on top of that, is holding back what you're trying to do. So everything has to get put on the back burner. But somehow or another, you still keep that beast mindset. Even through all this adversity, you still keep that beast mindset. The goal to be one of the best independent film producers and actors. Let's call it what it is. So that's welcome to the show without further ado, all the way from New Orleans, the one, the only TJ Sebastian. What's up, big guy?
Hey, thanks for having me, Andre. I really appreciate it.
You know what? I'm kind of pissed that I went and got my beard trimmed and they screwed it up. It used to look just like yours. I love it.
I saw those pictures, man. I don't know, it'll grow back.
Yeah, you know what is, you know what, TJ, this is a tripped out part. When I first grew the beard, it wasn't nothing I was ever used to, and I fell in love with it, and it grew like crazy. It seems like, you know, the old saying, the more you shave, the quicker your hair grow back. That's a myth because
That's right.
I think it's the opposite. The older you get, the slower the hair,
That's a fact.
the slower the hair grows back.
That's a fact.
So before we get started, you got a very interesting story of definitely that beast mindset and almost losing your life. And with that being said, figuring out how to not give up on your dreams. Tell the viewers a little bit about you before we get into your story.
So my background, I served in the military. I started in the Navy. I switched over to the Coast Guard. I did a total of 20 years. And toward the end of that journey, I was getting into martial arts pretty heavily. At first, it was jujitsu, ground stuff, a lot of grappling. And I was having issues with my back from car wrecks when I was younger. So I pivoted and I got into more of a stand-up style. And during a workout, just a sparring session, nothing aggressive.
Right.
I threw a kick that was a little bit aggressive, but the angle of it tore some cartilage on the inside of my hip.
Mhm.
And over the years, I would get injections and I would try to go through physical therapy and try to work it out. And it was just a nagging thing. But then it started progressing and getting worse. And it got to the point where the friction points were so irritated that it started degrading. And they did a scope at first to try to clean it up. And it helped for about 6 months. And
Right.
then it just started digressing even worse. They didn't want to do anything more than the scope because of my age. They wanted me to get closer to age 50 because they say after about 20 years you may have to have it replaced again because it'll wear out.
Right.
And it got to the point where it was a quality of life issue. I could barely walk. I couldn't do stuff with my family. I was avoiding social settings because I couldn't walk from here to there without significant pain. So the ortho said, "Well, let's go ahead and do it." I was, I guess, 47, 46, 47 or so. So it was close enough. And at first it was going fine. I was home after the surgery for about a week. I was getting to where I could take a few steps without my walker. I was on the comeback. It was going pretty good. And then just sitting in bed one night, I got the worst pain I've ever felt in my life, really close to the surgical site.
Mhm.
And my wife called the surgeon and he said, let's get him to the emergency room as soon as possible. But it was so severe, I couldn't even get myself up out of bed to get downstairs to the car. So he recommended calling an ambulance, and that's what they did. And ambulance ride, it was kind of late at night. It was pretty close to midnight. They couldn't take me to the surgical hospital where the surgery was done because they didn't have an emergency room. So they
Right.
had to take me to a hospital first to get me stabilized. And then from there, they transported me to the surgical hospital. That was an extra hour and a half that didn't really need to happen because of the amount of pain I was in.
Right.
And it turned out it was a bleed. It was they don't know why it happened or what caused it. It just happened. And they did an emergency surgery in the middle of the night. And it was rough. I was in the hospital for, I don't know, maybe a week from that one. They sent me home, and at home, same thing, just sitting in bed watching TV. I felt a pop and a warm rush, and the spot where they had worked on it started leaking. And
were these life threatening? I'm pretty sure they were because they were surgery. So, like, had you not, let's say, for instance, took a pain pill or something like that, could you have like died in your sleep or something like that from this popping or this injury?
So the first one, well, it was an internal bleed, so it was bleeding into my leg. And
Okay.
so the first time my leg was swollen. By the time they got me to the hospital, my leg was twice the size it should have been, blown up from the blood that was in there.
Wow.
So the surgery was going in and getting rid of that because it shouldn't be outside of the veins, right, and
Right.
arteries. So they left a little bit of a drain in. Well, that drain is what popped and started bleeding the second time. And I still had some of my military kit. We put a pressure dressing just one step short of a tourniquet to stop it because just holding pressure on it, it wasn't stopping.
Right.
And that time I was able to get myself up and down the stairs to the car. So my wife took me back to this time we went straight to the surgical hospital, and they immediately took me in to do another surgery. And my leg was blown up more than double its size that time as well. And my blood pressure when I got to the hospital was 60/40.
Wow.
They said I was white as a sheet. The surgeon told my wife that another 30 minutes I would have been dead because there just wasn't enough blood in my system. They did 5 blood transfusions to get me back up to where I was supposed to be. That was a much longer stay. That one resulted in most of the month of December of 2020 in the hospital. I was there for Christmas. And at that time, that was right when COVID was in full swing and they were real strict about who could come in and out of facilities.
Right.
I could have one visitor at a time, but the hospital staff was really nice. They let my wife and kids, who were pretty young at the time, take a quick test, COVID test, make sure that they didn't have anything, and they let them come in and spend Christmas with me, my wife and kids. So that was kind of cool. I wasn't expecting to be able to see my kids because up until then, I hadn't seen them. I hadn't seen my kids in 2 or 3 weeks.
Really? Like,
Yeah.
what do they think the reason for that happening to you, TJ?
They don't know. We talked to the surgeon about it, and at that point, he had been doing orthopedic surgeries like that for well over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he had had exactly 2 patients that had a complication with a bleed, and I was the second one. They don't know. Maybe I shifted because you have to be real careful about how you put weight in certain movements with that type of surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought process is I shifted funny, moved myself with my leg wrong, and just put a little bit too much pressure on something. I don't know. They'll probably never know why it happened.
How long has this been since this happened? The procedure.
So the hip replacement itself was at the very first week of December of 2020. And I was released finally from the hospital after everything right around New Year's of 2021. And in that time, in that whole month of December, I think I had maybe 5 days at home that kind of mixed in between the 3 dates, the 3 hospital stays.
When you faced with the thought of in 30 minutes or less, you would not have been here. How did that change who you are? Not saying you was a bad person, and my hats off to you for your service to this, to not only for me, but this country, but when somebody tells your wife or tells you 30 more minutes, he might not have been here. What was the shift like for you?
It was eye-opening for sure. It definitely changed my outlook. It firmed up my faith, I believe. I believe in God. I am a Christian, and I probably wasn't the best practicing at the time, and it was like a slap in the face that I needed to wake up and start acting like I should. It really turned. It was a turning point for sure in my life.
When you say it made you reassess your spiritual connection, how far had you drifted away from that?
At that point, I wasn't going to church regularly. I I just wasn't practicing like I should. I wasn't reading the Bible every day. I don't even know that I was praying every day at that point. I just wasn't living the life that I knew I should have been living at the time.
Hmm.
My family was still, they were going to church regularly, and honestly, that might be why I survived. I think God had bigger plans and had a bigger reason for me to stay around.
Hmm.
And I don't know.
What was the toll like for your wife and your children? They naturally, they're older. How were they looking at the fact that they almost lost you?
They were scared. They were really scared, especially the kids, because they saw everything unfolding. They saw the because to get me out of the bed and down to the ambulance, we live out in the country, so we were a good 40 minutes away from the hospital
Hmm.
at the point. Seeing all those people in the house, getting me packaged up on a litter to carry me down the stairs because the firefighters had to carry me down. They were scared. They were absolutely terrified, and I think it lended itself to their resilience and their strength, and I think it helped all three of them strengthen my wife and two kids. I've got a son and a daughter. I think it helped strengthen their faith as well.
You you seem pretty active. Like, person, is this was that was the injury that you suffered? Is that a common injury? And because I took Ishinru martial arts, and I know it can be sometimes the wrong move can do it. But do you know of anybody else that had suffered that same type of demise that you did from practicing martial arts?
No, not really. Not especially not from that. I knew a doctor. So the specific injury was I tore the labrum, which is
Okay.
inside the socket of the hip on the inside, and a doctor that I knew had torn a labrum doing something else. I don't even remember what it was, and he had his scoped the same way, and it was successful for him. Mine was probably just damaged enough that it didn't really help.
Hmm.
In fact, the ortho that I went to for the first repair at the time, he was the orthopedic surgeon for the New Orleans Saints. So he had done quite a bit of these,
Hmm.
and he was the one that was saying you're probably gonna need a hip replacement the way it's degenerated, but we need to wait till you're a good bit older.
Hmm.
I just wasn't fortunate enough that the scope repair helped. What it was earlier, years before that, I had been sparring and I threw kind of a low kick into a leg, and it kind of twinged, but I was young enough that I bounced back and it didn't really bother me.
Hmm.
The injury that tore it I threw a kick higher. I'm not very flexible, even though I did martial arts for years. Man, in high school, I
Yeah.
was the guy in football. After 2 or 3 weeks, the other guys were putting their face on their knees, stretching. I was barely touching my toes. I've just always been
Yeah.
very non-limber like that, and that I think lent itself to that injury. And I threw a
Okay.
kick forceful that was probably outside of my
Range of motion.
range of flexibility, and because I forced that, it caused that labrum. Something had to give, so it caused a tear, and then because it was rough, it just started. As I would walk in normal daily life, it started grinding itself and degenerated to the point of no return.
How did you refocus your mindset? Because naturally you can't go back to doing what you were doing, at least to that level. We can speak, but how was you able to get your mental aspect back?
It was difficult, and it's still difficult. There's a lot of stuff that I just can't do anymore. A, a lot of things I had to give up. I don't ride motorcycles anymore because it's just not it. I know a lot of guys that have had hip replacements that still ride, and
Hmm.
I rode a horse in a film, but I had to be very careful getting on. I had to use a step to get up on it, and that I can do things. I just have to kind of modify the approach that I take to do so. And it's a daily challenge. Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. It's a challenge daily to overcome the mindset of I can't do something. I can do it. I just have to do it a different way.
How has that affected you in your movie career? Because you are an actor, you have appeared in a couple of movies, but do you disclose what you went through, or will that? Do you feel like if you disclose that, it can hinder you getting roles in as an actor, or even directing or producing movies?
So behind the camera, not so much,
Okay.
because most of what I've done production wise and uh, second camera has been with friends that were making the project. So that wasn't that much of a challenge, but that's actually a great question. It has impacted me probably more in my own mind than anything else. Early on, I was discouraged from disclosing anything from uh, acting coaches, and not my current agent, but my first agent. It was just, if there was something that I couldn't do physically, I was encouraged to just say, oh, it's a scheduling conflict or whatever, but don't disclose that you can't do something because of physical limitations.
Hmm.
So I didn't disclose it. I didn't hide it. Or I mean, I did hide it. And on my podcast, we met an actress. We actually worked with her on a film called This Soldier's Heart.
Hmm.
She was disabled as a teenager. Uh, I don't remember the specifics of it, but she had some mobility issues, and she's one of the biggest advocates for disabled actors that I know of. Her name's Eileen Gruba, and she has been very encouraging to me. And the moral of the story is just be yourself, and it is what it is. I got an audition for a TV show, but they wanted somebody that looked and could move like an NFL linebacker. In fact, the breakdown of the character said moves like an NFL linebacker,
Hmm.
and the character was somebody that had escaped from jail, from a jail transport, and they were running from the police, and they end up tackling somebody. And I just can't move and run and do that sort of physicality. So I had to decline the audition. And I don't think that has hindered me from getting other auditions. The industry in general has slowed down drastically in the last couple of years. Auditions have slowed down. But I don't think that I have been personally impacted by that.
Have
It
you put yourself in a position prior to your agent saying, no, you shouldn't say this, prior to you saying, you know what, I'm going to be my authentic self? Um, were there times to keep what you love going strong and to allow opportunities to continue to happen? Did you put yourself in harm's way?
yeah, yeah,
Really? Give me an
for
example.
sure. So I mean, honestly, we did a film as part of the 7 and 7 International Film Festival. It's a competition where you have 7 days to cast, write, shoot, edit, and submit a film that has to be no longer than 7 minutes. And we decided to do a Western on that one. We could pick the genre ahead of time, but you can't write, you can't do anything until the day that they give you. They give you a certain line of dialogue that has to be included, a certain character that has to be included, and a couple of other things that are told to you the day you get the information. And then you have 7 days to do it. So we knew we were going to do a Western, but we didn't know much else. And through some contacts, I arranged for us to be able to ride horses on a ranch for some of the scenes. And it was me and one other actor that had any experience riding horses, period. And we needed at least four of us on the horse. So the lady that owned the ranch was a stunt stand in on one of the horses from a distance. And then the fourth guy, we just we just put him on the horse and hope for the best. And like I said before, we had to be careful on how I got on the horse. I I grew up riding horses, and that's kind of a thing of pride, not using the step to get up on a horse. You have to be
Right.
able to do it yourself. But knowing my limitations, I knew that I needed that assistance just because I can't throw my leg like I used to. So we used a step stool, and I got up on there carefully. Now, don't get me wrong, the whole time I was nervous that I wasn't going to be able to hold on like I should, and I would lose control and fall off. And
I was just thinking that, like, were your hip flexors strong enough to, engulf the horse to keep you stable, the core?
it was challenging. And I kept the horse from going into a full gallop or a run so I could maintain that control. And we didn't really need full running for the scene anyway.
Right.
So I just tried to be very careful and just maintain control the way I was taught to do. And, you try to connect with the horse before you get onto it. You let them know that you're their friend. You're not going to hurt them. You're not going to put them in a situation.
Right.
If you keep the horse calm beforehand, hopefully they'll stay calm. So I've been around horses. I understand how to be around them.
Did
And
you share that
honestly,
with your wife, that you was about to embark in this particular role and this is what you have to do to get this part? And if so, what did she say?
yeah, she knew what we were planning to do, and I can't remember if she was on set when we shot that or not. She knew. She just wanted me to be careful and make sure that I was paying attention to what I was doing. And it wasn't like we spent 8 hours on horses for that
Right.
scene. It was only that setup was only a couple hours, maybe a few hours worth. And there were times where I could take a break and get down. It wasn't miserable. I was sore after, of
Yeah, I
course,
bet you were.
but I mean, it was doable. You just have to find ways to make it happen.
So how did
Um,
the movie turn out?
I think it turned out pretty good. Yeah.
But what did the panel think about it?
So
The only reason why I'm asking is this. The only reason why I'm asking is this, because you mentioned a prestigious company that gives people like yourself and new people a chance to get their stuff analyzed. I guess that's what you can say, analyze. And feedback is important. So when you submitted it, what happens when you submit your film, and when you submitted yours, what was the feedback that you got, and what did you learn from it? Good, bad, or indifferent?
Yeah. So I don't remember exactly. There were several nominations: best supporting actor, best writing, directing. I think the cinematographer won best cinematographer and maybe best editing. I think the film itself. I didn't win anything, but I think the film itself won a couple of awards, and I think one of the actors won best supporting actor, maybe. It's been a while since I've looked at it. I don't want to I
For,
don't want to lie about it. It would be a guess. It did win a couple of awards. So it
for 7 minutes, what do you put in something for 7 minutes to make it attract that much attention? Uh,
so that's that's the challenging part about doing those competitions where you have between 4 and 7 minutes for a film. To
yeah,
me, it's harder to pare it down to get it
where it
within
makes
that.
sense.
Say again.
To what? To shorten it so it can make any sense? You're talking 7 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a trailer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's harder to make it shorter to me than it is to have enough content to fill up that time frame. So it comes down to the writer. I've done a few different of the 48-hour ones, and I've
Mhm.
done the 7 and 7 one a couple times. And the filmmaker that I've worked with the most on that is named Matt Carroll. And he's a phenomenal writer. It really comes down to the writing and being succinct
Mhm.
and knowing the character development that you want to achieve during that time frame.
Mhm.
And then you have to trust and work with the director of photography to make sure you're getting the best angles and telling the best story. So, yeah, that's
So your best. So if you was to recommend advice to someone that said, "Wow, you know what? I like to do some of that." You're saying that the key player in this is really the writer.
yeah, honestly it is. The writer, and most of the ones that I've done, the writer also directs because it's usually their project. They're usually the team leader,
Mhm.
and that's what it comes down to. Everybody has a piece of the storytelling puzzle.
Mhm.
So the acting has to be good. It has to be crisp, and the shots from the camera, they have to be spot on. The editing, because you also have a very tight time frame of when you can edit. So
Mhm.
you have to just pick the best shots that tells the best story, you know?
What do you think you could have done differently with the stuff that you sent in now that you sit back and look at it? Do they give you feedback?
Well, the feedback comes from, and there's audience choice awards as well. The audience will pick what they felt was the best film, and that's where the feedback comes from. It doesn't come from the film festival itself, it comes from audience and voting and stuff.
What got you into doing films? You know, because you came out of the military, um, started doing martial arts. Was filmmaking and production and being an actor all part of this hidden secret that you had while you was on the ships?
No, it honestly, it wasn't. When I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be an actor, but I didn't know how to get into it, and I never really pursued that.
Right.
Then later in life, I had some friends. At the time, the film industry in Louisiana was booming. There were all kinds of TV shows. NCIS New Orleans was a big one. The Purge was a big one. There were just a lot of big productions here. And I had friends that were working background, and they said, "Hey, it's pretty easy to do. You just sign up on this site, and if you fit what they need for a particular scene, they'll call you up." And I got in on a TV show called Twisted Metal that was based off of an old Sony PlayStation game.
Okay.
And the big rule with background actors is you're not supposed to interact with the actors that have speaking lines, the principal cast, because they have to focus on staying in character and what they have to do.
Right.
And they just don't want, fanboys distracting the talent, right?
Right.
So I had a small scene that was Anthony Mackie, Captain America.
Yeah.
He's also from New Orleans. And
Really? I didn't know that.
yeah, and two other local actors, actually three. And I was the only one that wasn't cast by doing an audition and had speaking lines. I was the only background guy. And this was just about a year and a half after my surgery. So I still had a good bit of challenge with walking and mobility.
Mhm.
And I had to carry a milk crate full of batteries back and forth probably 30 times from backstage to the trunk of Anthony Mackie's car. It was rough. It was difficult. I almost fell a couple times. But between the scenes, one of the actors, a guy named Jordan Salome, was talking to me and said, "Hey, man, you've got a really good look. Have you ever done any speaking roles?" And I said, "No, I don't even have any idea how to get into it."
Right, right.
And he said, "Well, here's what you do." And he started laying it out.
Mhm.
Start taking acting classes, get some professional headshots, start working on indie projects, filming things, getting some footage for reels, and start auditioning. And the classes that I started taking were about how to do self-tape auditions because everything is submitted through self-tapes.
Right.
And started taking classes real heavy, started auditioning a lot. And that's how I got my foot in the door, was just from doing that one background role and having one principal actor that was kind enough to engage a background guy between scenes.
You know what?
And
Your story sounds like the same identical. I always tell people everybody has a common thread. There's another guy that we have on the show that the same thing happened to him. He was in New York. He was doing pretty much the same thing you did, and the guy gave him the same information, and now he's a famous actor now. I said I went to school with him. His last name is Ford, and I was like, wow. What's been the most difficult part in so far for you in pursuing the acting?
probably just booking roles. The difficult part lately has been the decline of the industry. And there's a lot of factors I think that are impacting that. Before the strike, I was averaging so the agent I had at the time, there's a casting site that everyone uses called Actors Access. And if you have representation, casting directors, if they want to see you for something, they'll send the invite to your agent. Then your agent sends it to you through that site. You tape the audition and then you submit it through that. The first agent I had, I was allowed to go on and look for roles that I was interested in and self submit. Currently, only my agent can submit me. If I see something that sparks my attention, I can say, "Hey, can we submit for this?" And she'll submit me. But before the strike, I was averaging 3 to 5 auditions a week.
Mhm.
And then after the strike, everything slowed down to where it was only non-union indie stuff that was on there, a lot of commercials, and it just never really picked back up after that. Now, I'm fortunate if I get one audition a month, maybe two.
What do you think is the bigger picture that changed? And it's funny because with so many people trying to get into the get into the occupation of being an actor and actresses, you would think that film directors would be like, "Hey, let's go for it." But I'm constantly seeing the same actors and actresses on every single movie that's coming out. It's become redundant because I'm like, you get used to seeing, let's say, for instance, Captain America playing the Human Torch. And he goes from the Human Torch to Captain America, and you'd be like, then he's playing another thing. I'm like, okay, don't you have any other people that are auditioning for these roles? So, based on your experience, what do you think is going on?
It's it's money. It comes down to money. After the strike, the studio started, and the pandemic hurt it too. It went from a movie would release, it would go to the theaters and stay in theaters for a certain amount of time before it was available on streaming services. But then at first, when it came out, it was available for rent for $20 or whatever. Then it would go to the streaming platforms. Well, after the pandemic started, they shifted their model to, well, it's in theaters, but if you don't want to brave the theater, you can watch it at home, and it'll be expensive, but it'll still be available to you.
Hmm.
And they started doing all this binging of TV shows, and people want it right now. And the bigger studios started, or streaming platforms like HBO and Netflix, they started shelving some of the projects for tax write-offs, so that hurt things. And then tax credits is a big thing. Some of the tax incentives started drying up in some of these locations, and other places, Canada, Europe, it started becoming cheaper to film there. And then so if you look at who are famous actors, the top 3% that make the most amount of money, that are the celebrities,
Hmm.
they can afford to fly to Europe or to Canada or to wherever, or to New York if they're local to Los Angeles,
Hmm.
and work and put themselves up in a condo or whatever for that 2-month shooting schedule.
Right.
And somebody like that isn't going to work for scale, but it just started being cheaper for them to work, to have somebody that could afford to do it, to go elsewhere and work as a local hire, meaning production's not paying for their living accommodations. And I've done it. I've traveled to Arizona, I've traveled to Texas, I've traveled to Atlanta, and put myself up while I'm filming.
Just
And
get an opportunity, huh?
because it was an opportunity,
Yeah.
trying to get experience and footage.
What do you think now about so many independent actors and movie producers? Now, we just had a guy here that just he's an author, and he just did a movie, man, that just went pretty much viral. I mean, low budget too, and I'm thinking, but a good movie, a good storyline, like you said, it makes perfect sense. But what's your take on that? Do you see a shift in the industry now that people are saying, you know what, we want to make our own stuff, we want to tell our own story, we want something different than what we're seeing? Because, like I said, I get tired of seeing the same actors and actresses in every single movie that comes out. It doesn't even spark me to even want to look at it anymore.
Same here. And yes, I absolutely see a shift. Some of the better movies that are coming out are lower budget indie type projects, where they're focusing their money on telling the best story instead of sensationalizing it with big names. And
Right.
another big thing that's really starting to hurt stuff is AI. A lot more projects are starting to shift that. If you go on and listen to an audiobook, for instance, they're just not hiring voice actors to do that stuff anymore. Now they're using AI to do that, unless it's a big name author and a big name book. For the most part, it's AI, and they're starting to use. Before, it was big studios like Marvel that could afford to do the real high end CGI that looked realistic. Well, now you can create stuff on your computer with AI tools way cheaper, and it looks relatively realistic. And
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is hurting the industry. But the A24, these smaller still union, but production, I don't know how to explain it. It's hard to explain. But I'm stuttering and stumbling all over all over the place.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, the indie projects, I see a shift more towards smaller things, because people are getting tired of seeing those things like you were talking about just getting cranked out, and the production quality is terrible.
Yeah, and the
And
storylines are terrible. Let's get real. I
mhm,
can't tell you. the last time I saw a movie that really sparked my interest because I keep seeing the same people, and I just turn it away and be like, is this where entertainment has gotten us
Yeah.
to where we lost creativity and we're now shifting and even music to a computer?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I don't know if the industry can come back. What I think needs to happen is a shift back to storytelling, and not trying to get political one way or the other, but bringing in social politics into some of this, I think, has hurt some of the storylines.
Right.
Whichever side you fall on, I think that has interrupted good storytelling. Sure, there should be some things that are brought up. I'm not
What do you
saying there's
mean when you
anything.
say that those two things? Give me go a little bit deeper in that so I can get some clarity.
Let me think of a good example. Okay, so a really big movie that got a lot of Oscar attention, Oppenheimer.
Oh yeah,
That
I
was
love
just
that.
yeah, so that was just a good story about Oppenheimer and how all that evolved. There wasn't a lot of politics brought into it, good or bad or
Right.
indifferent. It was just a good story. I'm trying to think of something. I can't think of an example right now of something that I just turned off. But if they're getting on there and they're using the film as a platform for politics and
Right.
trying to get you to think one way or the other,
Hmm.
and it doesn't really play into the story. I can't think of a good example right now, but some of that I think has hurt good storytelling.
Right.
And maybe it's just me. I prefer not necessarily documentary style, but more true to life stories.
Right.
And a lot of even the superhero movies have just gone off the rails with unrealistic, goofy stuff that it wasn't the same. It's not the same superhero movies of 15 years ago
Right.
where it was just a good story.
Right.
And now they've got weird storylines, and a lot of the CGI has gotten out of hand.
It takes a lot of decoding. Somebody says, Andre, why do you keep watching the same movies over and over again? I said, because the new movies, in order to understand what they're saying, sometimes you have to watch it several times in order to understand the crypt
Yeah,
codes that's in it. Because if it's not a straight story, it's symbolic messages woven with inside the story through pictures or maybe a particular word that this person says. Then you go back and go, oh, now I see that. You know what I mean? The creativity isn't there anymore. You have
yeah,
to. Now it's almost like you got to look for the needle in the haystack when you're watching it.
yeah. I think you kind of understand what I'm getting at with
Yeah.
that. I think there's been a degradation in storytelling, and some of them have shifted to, instead of telling a good story, trying to make a good point. You're a bad person if you don't think this way, whatever side of the fence it falls on.
Hmm.
It just seems to me it has shifted a lot between that and cranking out project after project
Right.
and saturating certain things. And like you said, the same people over and over again. It's not spreading the wealth, so to speak.
Before we wrap up, knowing so much that's going on, why are you sticking with it?
Uh, that's a really good question. I just love to tell a good story. I enjoy the process. I enjoy the process of figuring out a character. How do I relate to that character?
Mhm.
Some people say, oh, if you're an actor, you're just a good liar. Well, no, acting is not lying. Acting is living truthfully in a given imaginary circumstance. And I love the process of figuring out who who is this guy? How do I tell this story? And if I can bring something to the screen that people enjoy, that's what makes it worth it to me. Even if a lot of people don't see it, I enjoy the whole process. I enjoy the friends that I've made along the journey and just getting to create. I enjoy creating.
Give me an example of what you just said of a character that you had to get into that role and it changed not only your perception of who you are, but it changed you as an individual. Because most people don't realize that some characters that you're playing can really have a profound effect on your own personal life.
Yeah, that's true. Um, so I did a film in Atlanta. It was a student project. It was a master's thesis that the filmmaker was working on through SCAD in Atlanta. And I'm drawing a blank on what SCAD is, but SCAD is among other things, it's a creativity school, filmmaking, and
Mhm.
I'm completely drawing a blank on what it stands for. Anyway, the project was about mental illness and having the courage to seek help if you need it. And I played one of the stages of the character. There were three different stages. Two of them were, uh, two of the other actors were the voices in my head and how I interacted with the world and the way I saw things. And I kept going back to this mental facility trying to seek for help, but the place was closed down, and getting into the mindset of this guy that had an emotional break from reality. Everything that was happening in my world was happening in my head. And I played the version of the character that looked like me, older, long hair, long beard, tattered clothing, living on the streets for who knows how long. And the moral of the story was about seeking help if you need it, because there's a stigma about asking for help when there's mental illness.
Mhm.
And it was just trying to shine a light on that. And I had to get into the mindset of this guy that had a break from reality. And it was challenging. It was one of my more challenging auditions and callbacks. And being on set, the director, the filmmaker was just great. He would give me just really good advice on the particular moment in time that I was focused on.
Mhm.
And it had a pretty profound impact on me. Coming from the military, you see guys all the time that come back from a deployment just broken.
Mhm.
And the culture is you don't ask for help. You don't speak up and let people know that you're struggling with something because, well, you just don't do that. There's just a stigma against it. And
So, what did you wind up doing? Did you take a stance for what you believed in through your film producing and acting to showcase that, hey, I played this particular character, but you know what? In reality, it's not a lie. This is I've seen it, I witnessed it, now I played it.
um, I guess I'm not really following the question. I'm trying to wrap my head around. I don't know. Ask it again. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. No, I was saying, like, what kind of stance did you take on that since it had such a profound effect on you? Like, that you decide, that, hey, I'm going to speak out on this a little bit more. Yeah, I've seen it being in real time, but to actually play this, it's a whole different ball game. Now I'm in
Yeah.
character, and it doesn't feel good.
Yeah. It certainly has helped. It certainly helped with courage. When I was still on active duty, there was an enlisted guy that was struggling. He was coming to work, you could smell alcohol on him. He was just messing up. He wasn't doing his job. He was getting in trouble a lot. And I got tasked with doing an investigation on something that I think it might have been a domestic violence incident that happened in base housing with his wife. And as an officer, I had to investigate that. But I dug in deeper. I asked, why did this happen? And surely it wasn't just this guy was just angry and beat his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And started digging in. I realized there's more to this. And it turned out the guy was suicidal. And I asked him point blank. And he was. And he had a plan. And I stopped the investigation. I immediately took steps to get him help. And we started getting him the help that he needed. And my understanding is that helped him. It recovered. I don't know that he salvaged his career after that, because he had some pretty big stumbles there.
Mm-hmm.
But it got him the mental health help that he needed. And the hard part is overcoming that mantra of, you don't talk about it, you don't speak up. And I think this project has helped with courage to be able to say, yeah, if you've got something going on, get help. You don't have to broadcast it to the whole world and tell everybody about it.
Right.
But get the help that you need. Seek help.
You know what, TJ, thank you so much for taking time out to come and share such a great, impactful story of that beast mindset. And thank you once again for protecting and serving our country. What's next for you? What's next for you? You got a lot of things going on.
I hope to just continue to create, hope to continue to get some film projects, and, try to grow our brand a little bit and share information about the film community, and just continue on.
And you got a podcast. Tell me about the podcast. What's it about? How can the viewers listen, follow, share, and subscribe to you?
Sure. So the podcast is called NOLA Film Scene. NOLA is the local colloquial abbreviation for New Orleans, Louisiana. And I have a co-host who is also an actor. His name's Brian Plato. And we're on all the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Our website is nolafilmscene.com. And we talk to everybody in the film industry, from hair and makeup artists to production to other actors, and try to share people's stories and shine a light on filmmaking. Everything from small local indie projects up to big Hollywood productions.
That sounds really good. And you know what? There's a need for that. Do you guys also take call-ins or work with people that, almost like a yellow pages for somebody that's trying to get into the industry? Are you guys a resource for that as well?
Not as much. It feels like a lot of our followers are other people in the industry itself. We've had a handful of people reach out and say, hey, I've got somebody that's interested in getting into voiceover work. How do they go about doing that? And it's mainly people reaching out through direct messages or, comments and stuff, but we're not an intentional source for that, but that may not be the worst idea.
Hey, I just gave you something to think about, huh?
That's right. That's right.
TJ, thank you so much for taking time out to come on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you subscribe, like, share, follow, do whatever it takes to make a difference in somebody else's life as well as your own. This has been another, and I do mean another, exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton Show.